Hey guys, what's up, Mr. Castro? Let's take a look at World War II and the things that led up to World War II. So, one of the things that's really important to understand is that when the Depression hit, when Roosevelt took over, one of the things that happened is as a result of our depression, right? A lot of the other countries in the world they also began to suffer, and in most cases more than we did. And so, one of the things that's going to happen is that there was supposed to be a conference, an economic conference, scheduled to take place in London, where these countries were going to discuss like how to stabilize the economies. This, we don't know what it would have done in terms of whether it would have fixed the economies, but the United States, it would have kind of been like the euro, like the way the euro is now, where you have all these different countries um, that essentially have to depend on each other. And so the United States wasn't sure if that's what they wanted to do. And so Roosevelt actually pulled us out because he did not want the United States to be controlled by other currencies, which, in a sense, strengthens our isolationism, right? Not in a good way. So one of the things that also happened is because it was becoming really expensive to be an imperialistic country during these times of economic need, American sugar producers also urging the United States to release the Philippines. In 1934, we passed the Tidings-McDuffie Act, which basically said that the Philippines would be independent in 1946. And again, kind of reinforcing the fact that we wanted to focus on ourselves. This is going to be really important too because it's going to make it a lot easier, kind of an open door for Japan, who in 1931 had invaded Manchuria, to step in. Then we have Russia. In 1933, FDR recognized the Soviet Union. This was really important in terms of U.S. trade. The Soviets would discourage German and Japanese aggression. So the United States, we finally acknowledged the fact that Russia was now a Soviet communist nation. One of the things also is that in 1934 we realized the importance of open trade. So in 1934, Congress passed the reciprocal trade agreements. The idea was that trade is a two-way street. It was supposed to lower the Hawley-Smoot tariff, and again reverse the traditional high tariff policy of the United States. And then, of course, the failures of World War One, the Treaty of Versailles did little to help war-torn nations. European democracies began to collapse one by one. And of course, we'll see the rise of fascism in Europe. So, post-World War One world paved way for the rise of dictators, right? So, fascism is a political philosophy that places the importance of the nation above the individual, and then Nazism is fascism plus racism. So, in Italy, we have the rise of this fascist Benito Mussolini. He fought in World War One. Italy had been shortchanged at the Treaty of Versailles, he felt. He organized the fascist party in Italy, and then in 1922 he threatened to march on Rome, and so as a result the Italian king appointed him Prime Minister of Italy. He suspended all elections, outlawed other political parties, and took control over the police and the military and created a fascist nation. And then, of course, born in Austria, we have Adolf Hitler, enlisted in the German army during World War One. He was outraged at Germany's outcome from the Treaty of Versailles. In 1919, he joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party. In 1923, he tried to overthrow the government with the Beer Push. As a result of this Beer Push, he was thrown in jail. While he was in jail, he wrote Mein Kampf, in which My Struggle or My Fight, in which he outlined two things. Number one, that the Germans were a superior race, that they were these chosen people, and that number two, in order to continue thriving, that Germans needed Lebensraum, or living space. And then again, one of the things that he's going to talk about too, right, is getting rid of the Jews. So in January 1933, the Nazi Party was the largest group in the Reichstag, and they enacted the beginnings of the Nuremberg laws, controlled police, controlled the military, and began to create some racial superiority laws. Hitler saw expansion as a boost to nationalism, so in 1936 he signed the Rome-Berlin Axis with Mussolini, so creating a treaty between the two of them. 1935 1937, the United States, seeing what was going on in the world, decided that they were not going to take part in what was going on. So the United States passed a series of neutrality acts, basically no trading with belligerents, no loans to belligerents, and no sailing on belligerent ships, again reinforcing American isolationism. Then the Spanish Civil War took place. General Francisco Franco, fascist, he fought against the Spanish Republican government. Franco was supported by Hitler and Mussolini. On the other side, the Republican military did receive some assistance from the Soviet-backed Americans, in this case, and some other rebels calling themselves the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. What you have here is a very famous painting, of course, which is Guernica, which is a painting by Pablo Picasso of the town of Guernica that was destroyed during the Spanish Civil War. Much of the destruction came at the hands of both Italian and German attacks. So in 1931, one of the things that ends up happening is Japan invades Manchuria, and in 1937, they did a full-on invasion of the rest of China. Now, one of the things that will happen as a result of this is that FDR, when he sees that this happens, he issues what his famous quarantine speech. And so in this quarantine speech, he basically said that the United States was not going to attack Japan, but that the United States was going to threaten Japan with an embargo, that if Japan did not stop doing what they were doing in Asia, that the United States would not give Japan coal or oil or some of the other things that it needed, economically speaking. Then in Europe, 1936, the Germans marched into the Rhineland. 1938, they marched into Austria. It took them 1 day. And then as a result of what was happening, a meeting took place in Munich in 1938. And as a result of this meeting, they basically asked Hitler, what do you want? And Hitler said, well, I just want the Sudetenland, which is the land of Czechoslovakia that is closest to Germany. That's where the German-speaking people live. And so they said, is that all you want? He said, that's all I want. And so they appeased him. They gave in to him. And of course, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain of England was super excited because he thought that we were going to have peace in our time. And one of the things he did was when he got back to England, he waved the famous paper in which Hitler had signed that there was going to be peace in our time. It turns out that 6 months later, Hitler marched into the rest of Czechoslovakia and took it over. Then, in 1939, Joseph Stalin and Hitler signed a non-aggression pact, and they decided to divide up Poland. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, starting World War II. They did this with, of course, the famous Blitzkrieg. As a result of this, England and France declared war on Germany. And now, because of what was happening, the United States decided to pass a new Neutrality Act, which was cash and carry. The U.S. would allow European nations to buy war materials, but only on a cash and carry basis. Then, between the fall of Poland and invasion of France, the Germans had what was called a phony war, which they kind of just didn't really do much for 6 months. When the phony war finally ended, they took over Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, and Belgium. And then, of course, by June of 1940, they marched in and took France. They left England as the sole obstacle for Germany, caused the U.S. to begin mobilization. Then, the Battle of Britain took place in August 1940. The Royal Air Force and Winston Churchill, right, we will never surrender. And so one of the things that happened was, as a result of the Battle of Britain, the United States decided to engage in what was called the Destroyers for Bases, where we gave them 50 World War I destroyers, and they gave us 8 valuable British bases in the Western Hemisphere. Then, England was running out of money, so the Congress decided to pass H.R. 1776, known as the Land-Lease Act, to become the great arsenal of democracy. In the end, it was $50 billion. This really angered Hitler because he realized that the United States could not claim neutrality if they were going to be aiding with this much money. So one of the things that also ends up happening is on June 22nd, 1941, Hitler decided to launch an attack on the USSR. One of the things he had outlined in Mein Kampf, he wanted to get to the Caspian Sea, to the oil, and so this brought the USSR to the Allies. Then in August 1941, the Atlantic Conference took place, a secret meeting between FDR and Churchill. His influence heavy by the 14 points, self-determination for all countries was kind of important. They basically began to discuss the possibility of the United States entering the war and then what the world would look like after the war, including the United Nations. One of the things that also happened is Japan, Italy, and Germany signed a tripartite treaty. Hitler was hoping to keep the United States out of the war. If the U.S. was to declare war on any of the three, other two would come to their aid, was the idea. Finally, Japan would not pull out of China, right? We talk about the final rape of Nanking. Americans had broken Japanese code that the Japanese were going to attack us, so the Japanese sent peace envoys who gave us medals for our efforts. And then finally, on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. As a result of this, the U.S. declared war on Japan, setting off Germany and Italy to declare war on the United States. And then finally, we have the United States fully involved in this great war.